We'll now have a good look at tomorrow morning's newspapers, and we're joined tonight by Sean Dilley. He's a political lobby journalist, works for TalkSport among other organisations. Very good evening to you, Sean.
Good evening, Chris.
And there's a particularly interesting set on papers on Libya with a number of different angles.
You can take your pick, really. I mean, the key message from all of them really is, why are we doing business as a country with, as the Mirror describes it, dancing with the devil? And of course, this is because, for those not so familiar, Mr. Kusar is said to have had some knowledge on who actually shot WPC Yvonne Fletcher in the public order situation in 1984 outside the Libyan embassy. He's said to have masterminded potentially the Lockerbie bombings in 1988 and been involved in all sorts of very nasty things. And of course, it goes to the question as to whether or not he's going to be prosecuted or held to account for his actions.
Well, we'll see that theme crop up in quite a few of the papers, but The Independent has a further twist to it all.
Yeah, The Independent claims that there are 10 others who are looking to defect, possibly looking to destabilise the government, which links in as well rather nicely to the story in the Mail as well. It claims that there's a special envoy having secret talks in Whitehall in the United Kingdom at the moment.
In The Guardian, yeah.
In The Guardian,
yeah.
I beg your pardon, I'm sorry. And of course that's a key aid, obviously, to Gaddafi's son. Now, this would be interesting if it's true, because the suggestion is in The Guardian that they're looking for, and that, to use their word, an exit strategy. The regime there, that they're potentially looking to gently pull out of power, because although we keep hearing the same rhetoric coming from the United States and the United Kingdom governments here, that what we're not looking to do is force regime change, what we're looking to do is enforce this UN Resolution 1973. There's been very clear pressure, very hard pressure on Gaddafi. Of course, it's not impossible that he could survive, but it's hard to imagine how he would be able to survive with so much diplomatic pressure.
I mean, it's got the two stories here, The Independent and The Guardian, are really quite different. On the one hand, there is the claim that the Libyans are in London talking to the West, talking to the British, and on the other, a whole load ready to join the foreign minister and leaving. It's very difficult to fathom out just what's going on.
I mean, the world of intelligence is deeply murky, as we know. But I tell you, interestingly, Whitehall has been thrown into sort of a rumour mill generally, and I believe it is the Telegraph looks into conversations that Jack Straw, the former Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, everything, he's been everything as Jack Straw in the last government, says that Mr. Kusar has been a really helpful intelligence source over the past decade. So to what extent has he been speaking with intelligence here?
Well, we'll come to that a little later. Let's have a look at the bottom of The Guardian. There's just a story, first of all, on George Osborne and the windfall tax on North Sea oil, which many are saying is a huge problem for the government. And here The Guardian, Osborne urged to drop £2 billion windfall tax.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just remind viewers that this was mentioned, of course, as a fair fuel stabiliser in the budget the Wednesday before last. And the idea being, at the moment, any oil that is retrieved from the North Sea is taxed at 50%. What the government would like to do is raise that to 62% when the price of oil is a certain threshold, and we're talking $75 a barrel. Now, what the oil companies say is that they didn't have an opportunity to consult on this. There's said to be a cabinet split, which obviously Treasury sources are denying, both to the BBC's political unit and also to myself, is that some of these key figures say they only had 48 hours notice before the Chancellor announced this in his budget. So the oil companies, obviously, they're upset, and they're saying that they account, if you like, for a quarter of all private sector investment, and they would be prepared to pull that. Already we've seen somewhere in the region, I think £6.2 billion of investment that they put on hold in the North Sea until it can be tested out, this new tax.
And the Guardian story is saying that the Treasury Minister, Justine Greening, who went to a meeting with the oil companies today, that somebody from within the meeting, one witness, said she was grilled alive. So angry were the oil companies.
Yes, I mean, they really are furious because, of course, from their point of view, they are stuck with this 62% tax. And she went there alongside the Scottish Secretary, Michael Moore, and the Environment Secretary and Climate Change Secretary, Chris Huhne. And, of course, the oil companies were just saying, look, guys, why didn't you consult with us on this? You've introduced this. You've not looked at the ramifications this has. And at the moment, obviously, Justine Greening, she didn't make the decision. She's a junior Treasury Minister, very good junior Treasury Minister, but it was her boss.
Well, there is a comment actually from the Treasury tonight to us, and it is that they're flatly denying that.
Well, they would, wouldn't they?
They say the Guardian story has been cobbled together, and there is no change in policy. I mean, is there any sense that the policy will have to change? That there could be a U-turn?
You don't know, do you? Because I mean, of course, there have been all these things in the past where the government have stuck to their guns and then looked slightly again. I mean, you take immigration figures, for example. We were talking about commitments to the tens of thousands rather than the hundreds of thousands. When the Home Secretary stood up in the House of Commons, all of a sudden we changed to their goal. So language does change. It is not impossible.
Okay, right, let's go to the Daily Mail, and therefore we go back to the treatment of the Foreign Minister, Musa Kusa, and the Mail. Why did we give this murderer sanctuary? I mean, it's rather like the Mirror's theme.
Well, I mean, that theme is pretty uniform throughout, but I think the most interesting angle, if you read down a little bit into the Mail, is they talk about the cost of guarding and accommodating Mr. Kusa. At the moment, he's believed to be in a safe house in London, and he's believed to be under very heavy guard, obviously. Now, of course, you know, you have round-the-clock protection, both military and police, and these things, they cost the UK taxpayer. And there are an awful lot of people with a slight lump in their throat when you consider that obviously the accusation is that he's been involved in planning terrorism on the UK mainland.
And they're saying that the cost would be more than £1 million a year. That's the cost of housing and guarding Musa Kusa, if that was to take place.
It's a lot of money one way.
Okay. Now, the Telegraph, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier, I mean, the headline, Dilemma over the Defector, it is quite an interesting point that they're making here.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think, again, they make the most they make the most articulate cases to potentially why we need to look at both sides here. It's all very well to say that it's a very bad thing to be doing business with somebody who's been involved in planning terrorism, but what you must consider here, obviously, is the fact that, okay, I know it's not the official line, but the clear message is that there is an attempt to destabilise the Gaddafi regime. And yes, sometimes you have to do a deal with the devil.
And one of the points the Telegraph makes here is that if you take the sort of tabloid line there, lock them up, almost, or bring the prosecutors in, then you scare off any other potential defectors.
And this is the same point as well, not just on that, but obviously, of course, the Scottish Crown Office are looking to, if you like, question, if not possibly prosecute Mr. Kusa. And of course, the point that's made within is that if you are actually sending the message, come over to the United Kingdom and we're going to put you in more trouble than you were in the first place, obviously that's not in the interests of the stability of the region.
And Con Coughlin, their executive foreign editor, is actually saying, you don't see this on any of the other front pages, we must thank him for disarming Libya.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to exactly the same points I was just raising there. I mean, look, if we look at everything in black and white, of course you shouldn't be doing deals with shady characters, but of course I suppose the point Con Coughlin makes very well there is that you have to sometimes look at the greater good, as hard as it might be.
Okay, let's just run through some of the others fairly quickly. The FT there on the Irish bank bailout, which we've been reporting on extensively. It's extraordinary figures.
This is huge, by the way. I mean, I just point out that obviously Libya is dominating the headlines, but this is, I mean, if you like, closer to home, this is almost as significant, I would say, much more significant, obviously, to people in Ireland, because, of course, as a result of these stress testing, as a result of government reforms, each and every person has around €17,000 on their shoulders as a result.
Okay. The eye is on tuition fees, saying effectively that virtually every university is going to go for the maximum fee, which is not what
Can we recap? I mean, just to point out, of course, when this 9,000 fee was mentioned, and this was really hard for the Liberal Democrat side of the coalition to swallow, the suggestion was that the £9,000 would be in exceptional circumstances. I was there in the House of Commons when this was said. It was very, very clear. Now, Ed Miliband had asked David Cameron at Prime Minister's question on Wednesday how many universities would be charging the 9,000, how many wouldn't. To be fair to David Cameron, he didn't try to wing it. He said, I don't have the figures to hand, but I'm happy to let him know. OK,
we just have a few moments left. Let me just quickly point to the Express, which is family warn kidnappers, Madeleine family. Kate McCann has a book coming out, and they're saying that this is a plea to the abductors to let her come home. I spoke to Clarence Mitchell, the spokesman for the family, just before coming on air, and he said that the Express hasn't spoken to the family at all. It's purely speculation. And just finishing with the few seconds we've got left with this extraordinary story on the Sun. Police quiz boy 13 over assault with marshmallow.
Yeah, I mean, again, exactly as we kind of suspected when we just got the paper in during the preview. One boy throws a marshmallow at another one. The police come in to investigate the child for assault with a marshmallow. It's an interesting charge, I would imagine. And as a result, the father of the boy who was supposedly assaulted with that vicious sweet said it's a total waste of police time and money. But we come back to the question of how much we're prepared to let teachers deal with discipline in the classroom, how much it's down to police, because, of course, it's a very conflicting message if we're saying, teachers, you have the power, I know. Let's call the old Bill.
Shoot does assume it's all true, and I'm not casting aspersions, but it cops.
Well, it's in the
sleep
Sun,
on
it must
school,
be.
yeah. Anyway.